I'm Ayanna Tibbs, and I'm interviewing Samuel E Vázquez. We're going to talk about his art, visual communications, and style writing. Thinking that every artist has a message, and in style writing you have a distinct voice that you're trying to display to the public. What was your message then, and how has that message changed?
So the message of style writing, it was just to have a voice for the young people. So it was very energetic, and that's why it was so bold and just full of motion. That's why the subway car was pivotal and very important vehicle to drive that message. My message now is speaking on that resilience of like being young and not having a lot of resources, and how you can still create. So it's showing that resilience through vibrant colors and gestures that are not really what people might consider well composed. So they're just very loose, very uninhibited. They're just go at it and just release that energy. So that's the message of my paintings now, and that's a trace of how resilient humans are. That out of anything we can create something. And oftentimes that something has a greater impact in culture in the world. And we all have a voice.
I like what you said about creating something out of nothing. Can you elaborate on that? What are some of the things or activities that you were doing at that time?
For example, some of the things that we did was reappropriate some of the things that were available. For example, we will take a deodorant canister and actually take everything out and take an eraser, break it apart and put it inside as the cutting, and then drop the ink there. So all of a sudden you went from markers that were probably like 3/4 inch thick to something that was like 2 or 3 inches. So that was the part of, trying to create our own tools to serve the purpose of what we were doing. Also like spray cans. The fact that spray cans were not really created to do this art form, you will have to find ways to accomplish your art. For example, we will go to the supermarket and take the EC oven caps and put them on the regular spray cans, because all of a sudden it was going to give you a wider spray angle. So time management is something concerning riding in the subway. So if you can cover a surface quicker, then you try to find ways to do that. Another example is for music. Nowadays we have digital technology to be able to mix. Back then it was not available, so you will take cassette tapes and mix from one, a double deck cassette radio, and mix from one to the other. Cut the actual tape and splice it together and create your own mixtapes. They could be 2 hours long. So imagine how long would it take to create that. So those are some of the examples that I can share with you.
One thing that I've noticed with writers today is that they seem to not really know the technique and balance of tag words or names that are created. How would you say you came up with Brain, and what are some of the techniques that got you there?
One thing I see with the new writers, because that's not part of the context of where they're writing, which in writing that's the biggest thing. And, the focal point is letter form. So one thing that in my generation we started looking at calligraphy, which is something that I think other writers should study. So it gave us the balance of how the letter form can even fold, because that's one thing. Once it got to the thicker markers, we were looking at the dimension of the letters itself and how they interlock with each other, which is something when I speak to younger writers, I say, how your letters are going to interlock, they don't even relate. But with calligraphy, you have to make one letter go to the next one. And another thing is the attitude. New York City at that time, and even till today, has an attitude about the city that's progressive, it's bold. So that's why the letters had movement, because it's almost like that's the way we walked. We walked a certain way, we listened to the music, so in the culture everything went together, even breakdancing. So when you look at breaking in the typography, it was almost all connected in the music. So it had that rhythm and flow of how you write. So when we say flow, that's an old school word, but mainly that's what we wanted our tags to do, to flow and have that forward motion, always being innovating and not kind of like leave it where it was. So those are some of the things that, you know, we look at the letter form. When I picked Brain, which is something I didn't know, it's actually a last name. Yeah, when I heard it, I was like, Brain is the last name? But the way I picked it was because in style writing, there's an unwritten law or rule that you should not have a name that is longer than 5 letters because you want to write them fast. Also, you don't want anything that has like too many syllables. So for example, brain, you know, in 2 syllables, it rolls real easy. When people talk to each other, it's like, hey King, or hey Brain, or hey Coke. So it seems to be, you know, a short phrase. And it also works well because oftentimes you didn't have a lot of space on a subway card if you were competing for that space. So you don't want, and also for time, you want to do it quick. So that's how I picked the name, and it's been, wow, almost now 33 years since I've been. And one thing that I noticed is that nowadays, the way I write it, it has evolved from where I first started. So it's a little more elegant. It's a little more efficient in how I write it. For example, a lot of writers have all uppercases on the letters. And I do have every other letter except the E. And it was for time purposes. Before I used to have it almost like a backwards 3, but I took 2 strokes to do it. Now I do it almost like in one motion. So I started cutting, even the R, I cut it from 3 strokes to 2. So those are things that you will evolve with your tag. And as a writer, you look into that.
You mentioned the attitude of New York and how the hip hop culture influenced the typography. Now that style writing is more international, do you think that it translates the same? In knowing how hip hop has evolved, has style writing evolved, or is there a disconnect?
So one of the ways that I've seen it evolve and change, hip hop as the music and the dance and style writing came from funk. You know, funk music is a lot faster. So the energy and the attitude was that. It was very aggressive and just moving forward with such a force. Nowadays, when you look at hip hop, probably like in the mid to late 80s, it slowed down. And I also see how style writing did the same thing because of the low pressure spray cans. So now writers can just spend, you know, just real slow and just kind of develop that area. Before we had to move fast because we don't want drips on our work. So that's how I approach my paintings nowadays. I still use high pressure spray cans on my work, my abstract work, which is good. And it's the fast movement that I'm releasing because that's where the energy is translated in a more organic and natural way. So that's the big switch that I've seen. It slowed down drastically.
So what are some of your inspirations and how have those changed in the last few years?
So my inspiration is still rooted in style writing because that's the history that I have with the New York City subway style writing movement. But one thing that's happening now is I'm looking at it more from the historical perspective and also culturally. So there's things that I'm putting there in my artwork that inspired from some of the nuances and some of the details of the culture of writing. Along with that, I'm introducing inspirations from everybody from Jackson Pollock to Ed Clark. If you haven't seen Ed Clark's work, make sure you check him out because he's about this time he's 90 years old, but he has some really amazing work. So I'm looking at the way he moved the paint around the canvas and the surface. And then Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's one of the earliest inspirations in my work. as far as how he blocks paint, and also just being spontaneous with the messages. I'm also adding more words and messages to my pieces in conjunction with the texture. So there will be a little more messages there. So that's how I see my work and how the inspiration is changing. Started in the subways, but it's moving more into looking at historical characters within our history and learning from different things. I'm also really excited at how I'm utilizing the paint itself, how I'm mixing some techniques and processes that are creating transparencies and just layering, and also contrast. So all those things I'll pick up from all those inspirations. So that's where the inspiration has, grown in the last couple of years, last 10 years.
How has the work transitioned into abstract expressionism, coming from the subways to where you are now?
So the way the work got to that point was, it was just a reflection of my journey. And I think, as being young, style writing is it could be a little technical once you started getting into that level of masterpiecing. But I do enjoy the more organic, the more spontaneous nature of abstract painting. So that's one thing that I kind of explored that, and I also wanted to see the work from a different perspective. And with the inspiration that I spoke about with Jackson Pollock, very spontaneous, Ed Clark and Jean-Michel Basquiat, I wanted to explore that abstraction in the work.
So, Sam, what are you currently working on?
I'm working on a body of new work for an upcoming exhibition at Gallery 924. So currently that's what I'm working on. This show is going to be a little more spacious as far as the works. So I'm creating larger pieces, exploring new ideas that I have with my work, and just continue to grow it more, and actually also working on some 3D pieces that I'm going to have for the show. So that should be pretty interesting to see how the work is going to be translated from my 2D work to 3D, and how people will be able to interact with. So I'm excited about that new work.
So what are some of the new concepts that you were speaking about?
So some of the new concepts that I'm working on in my paintings is actually just the physicality of how the paint is applied into the painting, showing the process, building more texture, but not being so conscious of building the texture. So it'll be something as I paint, the process of it, it's like tracing my pattern around the painting. So that's something that I'm working more to build up depth in the work itself, and motion and rhythm, utilizing different materials. So I'm really excited to introduce new materials to the work, which it will give the viewer a sense of how the work is going in a new direction, but still retain some of the history that I put into the work. So I'm very excited and elated about that, and can't wait to show the pieces. So it's going to be great.